Yes, welcome in. Just a couple days away for the Badgers taking on USC in their Big Ten opener. First time they played USC as a member of the Big Ten. I saw this stat the other day, Jesse. They've won every game against a team coming in their Big Ten opener. Wisconsin's won the first game against them. Did you know that? Did you hear about that? I saw a stat. I can't remember. It was on Twitter. Don't remember exactly who put it out there, but they've beaten every team in their first game uh, as a member of the Big Ten. So, like in their first meeting as a member of the Big Ten. So, Nebraska, obviously, in 2011, right? 1995 was the first time that they played Penn State. That game was in Happy Valley. Penn State was ranked sixth in the country, had won 20 straight games, and Wisconsin beat them. I think the other ones are Michigan State, Chicago, and it might have been Ohio State. I don't know. They have beaten new Big Ten members every single time they play them in their first game. Does that give you any hope for Saturday?
I like that stat. Everybody remembers that vaunted Chicago offense. No,
The
it does not.
Maroons,
It does
Big
not
Bad Maroons.
help in any way, but it's a fun thing to have. More relevant may be the fact that I think they put in the notes since 2017, Wisconsin's what, 6-1 or 7-1, coming off bye games or idle weeks, however you want to refer to it. And I think Fickle has only lost once during that stretch as well.
Was that last year? No. What game
No.
did they? What was the bye last year?
Well, last year was the Purdue game, and then Ches got hurt, and they had the bye and came back and
That's
won.
right.
Now, I also think a lot of that record has to do with who you happen to be playing after the bye. But hey, you're looking for positivity. I know we're all about the positivity. Then that's something that you can at least say Wisconsin has been able to do a good job traditionally of preparing coming off a week off.
I guess I should have just referenced the notes when I was talking about the teams that they beat because I totally forgot about. They went to Rutgers in 2014 and beat them in their first game there. They also beat Maryland at home in 2014, Nebraska, Penn State, and Michigan State. Not the Maroons for Chicago because Chicago was a founding member, I believe, of the Big Ten originally when it was called the Western Conference, whatever it was originally called. But yeah, so they are 5-0 since the Big Ten expanded in the modern era. I don't know what the modern era includes, but whatever. The Penn State game is as closest to this one as I can think because they were 2 touchdown underdogs in that game. Penn State was coming off a undefeated season, and no one expected them to win, and certainly nobody expecting Wisconsin to go into the Coliseum on Saturday night and win. We'll get into all of it. Before we do, Home Field Apparel is the official sponsor, our official apparel sponsor of the camp. We love their vintage gear. They've got so much new stuff from Wisconsin, not just from that platinum or that premium football box from earlier this year, or the coach's jacket, or the corduroy hat. They have these new heavyweight tees that they got up on homefieldapparel.com. So go check them out. You can get 15% off your first purchase by using the code Bucky24. All right, let's get into what this weekend potentially could look like and what success looks like for Wisconsin against USC in your mind.
I have to say, success is a win. I know nobody thinks that's going to happen and that the Badgers are 2 touchdown underdogs, depending on where you look.
15 and a half now, I thought.
15 and a half,
so.
right.
Yeah.
But I know this program has not been particularly good at any one thing this season, and you can say, well, they're in the game in the fourth quarter. That was kind of the thought 2 weeks ago against Alabama. At a certain point, this program success is winning. Now, whether you believe that's going to happen or is a possibility, that's a different story. But that's where I'm at. I just don't think anything else can be considered successful for where Wisconsin wants to go. And this game it's another measuring stick opportunity. That's a cliche, but it's just a huge chance when you start Big Ten play. If you want to wipe away what happened against Alabama and you can win on the road against a top 15 team to start Big Ten play 1-0, it would give this program a lift. It would give Luke Fickell a lift because so far he's 0-3 against ranked teams in his 1.5+ seasons now.
It would give him a marquee win. I was on the morning show this morning and was asked like, what is his best victory? And I don't have a great answer for that. Probably Minnesota, just because you got the Axe back. That's like Minnesota's always good time to win, but there's a whole lot more opportunities to pick out the worst losses. But we're not going to be. There's a lot more, a lot more choices there for worst loss that really would stand out. But we're not going to be negative today. There's no reason to be negative. They're going into a game on Saturday against a USC team that's coming off a loss to Michigan, a loss in which they got the ball run down their throat in the first half. Did a much better job in the second half of stopping the run until the final drive. And we're in position to beat Michigan on the road. Michigan did not have a passing attack. They also did have a mobile quarterback. That is obviously a huge difference here between Wisconsin and USC. So what success looks like, irrelevant, I guess, for you to say when you say a win is what success looks like. So let's figure out how they get that win.
Yeah.
What does a game plan for Wisconsin look like to go into the Coliseum on Saturday and get a win?
So let's start offensively. It's one of my big questions is what does this offense look like now that Braden Locke is taking over as the starting quarterback? I know when he met with reporters this week, he said, we're not going to reinvent the wheel. We're still going to do what we do, but very clearly they're going to have to tailor the game plan. Phil Longo is to whatever they feel like Braden's strengths are. And we've heard repeatedly from both Braden and Luke Fickell that one of those strengths is being more up-tempo, getting in more of a rhythm. I do wonder how that squares with this idea of being a possession type of team where they come into this game ranked 9th in the country in time of possession. The drive that was most successful against Alabama was a 17-play, 75-yard drive that spanned 8+ minutes. So I don't know how much you can just say, oh, we're going to go tempo now because Braden Locke's in the game. But I also think you've got to do a few things very well. First of all, your offensive line has to play its best game to date because I think you really need to lean on the run game so that you can take some pressure off Braden. And I think this is a game that you try to get some quick throws early from him to get him into a rhythm. You probably hear that a lot when you've got a younger quarterback or a guy coming in a tough situation. The short and intermediate throws to me are where they're going to have to win because it's certainly to me not going to be the explosives down the field, at least based on what we've seen. Tyler Van Dyke has completed, or he did complete since his season's over, I think 2 of 8 passes on throws that were 20+ yards. He barely aired it out. Most of the throws were either behind the line of scrimmage or from 0 to 9 yards. So I would expect it to be something similar with Braden. And he's got to complete passes at better than a 50% clip, which has been his career completion percentage today. So that's just offensively. It's a lot of things that they have to do well. But the other thing that I would say is I don't think they can look at what Michigan did and say, oh, we're going to do that. We're going to pass the ball 12 times and run it, was it 46 times for 290 yards? And obviously some of that happened to be because they had a mobile quarterback. I don't know that we've seen enough to believe this is old school Wisconsin where you can do that. Like when they had Kurt Phillips pass 7 times against Indiana in 2012 and ran it 60+ times. They're still going to throw the ball. They just have to figure out how to throw it effectively.
Yeah, I mean, go back and look at the games that Braden Locke started last year. Not played in, just started. But you could throw the Iowa game in there if you want to. But 41 pass attempts, 39 pass attempts, 41 pass attempts. Those are the games that he started last year. Do you want him throwing it that many times?
I would not. But again, I think, and maybe it skews the ratio slightly, but he's averaged 34 throws in the 5 games that he's got significant snaps. He threw 30 times against Iowa. Now, obviously, that's a little different because by the end, when he was throwing every time, they were down by 2 possessions. He threw the ball 26 times against Alabama. Maybe it's something that more closely resembles Alabama because that essentially was a whole game. I mean, he came in late in the first series. So I would not want to put it on him to throw the ball 40 times. But he's still going to throw it 20+ times, 25+ times. It's just what are you able to accomplish in those throws? And can you get enough consistently out of your run game to feel like you don't have to put it on Braden?
You're talking about some of those short intermediate throws. I look at the 2 throws that he missed last week as ones that he has to hit if they're going to beat USC. And that's the one to Will Pauling before the end of the first half and the one to Tretch. That would have been called back anyways, but hit the throw. He was running wide open. Against Alabama, the separation that Will Pauling had was wide open. Like those are 2 throws that I'm sure he wants back, but he has to be able to hit. And I'm sure that is usually he's one of the first guys into those media sessions after practice. He was not on Tuesday. He was one of the last ones to come in, and he was still in uniform, still so I feel like there was probably some extra time spent after practice on a variety of things, but you would hope some of that is getting the timing down with your receivers that can make those big plays, specifically Tretch and obviously Will Pauling, because if you hit those two, they're both touchdowns. Tretch would have scored, and obviously Will Pauling's ball was in the end zone. Those are touchdowns, and you can't miss those plays against teams that are ranked 13th in the country that no one expects you to beat.
Yeah, I didn't mean to suggest there would be zero chances taken down the field. You're right. I think the majority of them will be from short and intermediate. But if you get 2 a game, if you get 3 a game, you got to be able to connect, because that can make all the difference in a possession, but also in the outcome of the game.
You can't play anybody that's watched this team through the first 3 games, anybody that follows anybody and any one of us on Twitter, you can't play in a box. You can't do that and consistently beat good teams. And they have not pushed the ball down the field enough. And maybe it is because they haven't had a lot of success when they've done it, but while saying that they need to control the ball and control the clock and play the way that they have these first 3 weeks offensively, and wanting to be a time of possession team, which is clearly what they want to be, even if that's not what Phil Longo wants, they have to be able to complete some of those passes down the field and at least take those chances, because if you don't take the chances, no one's going to respect you, and they're going to come up and do what Alabama did, playing 2 safeties close to the line and not even worrying about guys beating you over the top. So Wisconsin has guys that can beat other teams over the top. We saw that last week. Make the throws, hit the throws, and you have a chance to win the game. I think that's as simple as it can be offensively. I do wonder exactly what maybe things do change a little bit, because the quarterback run game is not a part of this anymore. And I don't know how many called runs that they had in the first 3 weeks, but certainly the scrambling and being able to extend plays was something that Tyler Van Dyke showed a little bit of his ability to do that really against South Dakota. And even, on that play against Alabama where he was able to, where he ended up getting hurt. That's not Braden Locke's game. And you would think Phil Longo would have to switch things around a little bit for him to have success. But we'll see, because again, as we talked about on Tuesday, the mentality of this offense is not what it was last year. And this mentality of the offense does not feel like the mentality that Phil Longo has put on the field for much of his career. And so we talk about getting more tempo and that type of stuff. I guess I would honestly be surprised if that ends up happening on Saturday. I still think that they're going to be exactly what they've been these first 3 games, and wanting to control the ball and smash mouth and not give the other team too many opportunities.
I would think, honestly, they would be more like that, if anything, because you've got a difference in starting quarterback. And I know they were involved in a competition, but there's a reason why Tyler ended up winning the job. And you're right on, I don't know what you do. Do you run some of that read option game? I don't know why a defense would respect the possibility of Braden keeping it, unless it's one of those where
like Jack Cohn.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Jack Cohn in the Big Ten championship game, right? Yeah.
Maybe you pull off one of them, but I mean, this has to be the type of game where you don't want to make mistakes. You don't want to put yourself in a spot too where, let's say you go tempo and it looks like what it has looked like, and you go 3 and out. You're going to be in big trouble if you have a few of those and you can't establish something to move the chains and be the type of time of possession team that you've been the first 3 games. So, yeah, I mean, this is a tremendous challenge for Wisconsin. It would have been difficult even if Van Dyke had been healthy, but it just is all the more challenging when you got your backup quarterback coming in.
Other than Braden Locke, who are you looking at to have a big game for Wisconsin, that if they're going to have a shot?
Well, I would put it on a running back, and it could be Tawee Walker. It could be Ches Malusi. Those certainly, in my mind, will be the first 2 options, because we've said this repeatedly, they have lacked the explosive playmaker, or at least the explosives to date. And I don't know that you can put it on a wide receiver or a tight end, because Braden's going to have to be the one delivering the ball, and we don't know what that's going to look like. So can he get some help from one of the running backs to break a big play? Ches had a 20-plus yard run against Alabama, but then fumbled the ball away and basically gift-wrapped Alabama a 28-3 lead. It's not like Wisconsin was going to win the game anyway, but he's got that capability. Can you get a little bit more out of him and Tawee Walker?
Yeah, and how healthy is Tawee Walker? Because if you go and so they do the mic'd up things on Wednesdays, and that's always a very useful tool for people that don't get to see practice, to see who's practicing and who's not, and all that good stuff. And Tawee Walker still has a very significant brace on his right knee, just like he has, or just like he did last week against Alabama. So how healthy is he? I guess we'll find out. But I would imagine we'll get to see potentially more Katie Akamelli, and maybe even a little bit more Darian Dupree or Dylan Jones or whoever. Someone that can make a play. That's what you need. And you're right. Ches had a few nice runs against Alabama. The one that you talk about certainly stands out. If not for the fumble, he actually had a nice game. And if not for that bullet that went through President Lincoln's head, I mean, it was a nice play, right? So
yes.
If
other than that, Miss Lincoln, how was the play?
Right. So yeah, but defensively, it's another huge task, I think, for Wisconsin. A little bit different challenge than it was against Alabama. Miller Moss ain't going to get out and run around like Jalen Milroe did, but his playmakers are certainly on that same level, led by Zachariah Branch. And going back to that mic'd up thing, Max Lofi, who was the one that was mic'd up, wearing a pretty significant cast on his right hand. Actually, I should say it's a club. So, and he's the slot guy going up against Zachariah Branch. And I believe Ricardo Hallman was talking about it on Tuesday, saying the key to slowing them down is to get hands on them. And obviously, Max Lofi, I guess we'll see what that club looks like for the game. Maybe he won't have to wear it. He was joking around saying it was for the looks of it. It just looked good, so that's why he had it on. But that's obviously not the case. So that is another huge challenge. It's stopping that passing game.
I know you don't like the word elite, so I won't use it. This is the second straight game with very high level quarterback play. Really, the two times that this defense has been tested, and Miller Moss is going to challenge them. Yeah, he's not a mobile threat like Jalen Milroe was, but he's been as advertised this season. Maybe not the 6-touchdown MVP performance that he had in the Holiday Bowl against Louisville, but he diced up the first two opponents they played, LSU, Utah State. I think between those two games, 72.7% completion rate. And then he went and had 3 touchdowns against a very tough Michigan defense. And that Michigan defense got a lot of pressure on him. And there was one interception, but Mike Tressel talked about this play specifically. The throw that he had that gave USC the lead, and it felt like the Trojans were maybe going to pull this off. An outstanding throw. It's 3rd and 16. He had enough time. It was a perfect pass, and it went for a 24-yard touchdown. And Tressel said this, like, if you let him stand there and rip it, he's going to hurt you. So there's so many facets to what can make this team successful, but specifically this defense successful. I know Ricardo talked about the secondary. He wants it on them. Make it tough on the receivers that you force Miller Moss to spend another second in the pocket, and then potentially you get a coverage sack or pressure. I still wonder about where that's going to come from because we have not seen a ton of that up front. But obviously this defense is going to have to be a whole heck of a lot better than it was against Alabama.
Obviously, Zachariah Branch is the headliner. He actually played, Tretch Kahuna played with him in high school at Bishop Gorman out in Las Vegas for his senior year. So he certainly knows him, and actually, they both put up significant numbers. But I look at, and he's a huge task, but they have a 6'4" wide receiver in Jacoby Lane and another guy in Deuce Robinson that's 6'6". It's not that they don't have other guys, but the size and then the speed is going to be a huge, huge test for them. I think just as big of a test as Alabama was, for sure. The other aspect of this is you're right. They did not necessarily protect Miller Moss very well in that game. Michigan had 4 sacks, but they also had 8 tackles for loss, and they were making life difficult for the most part, especially early on. Miller Moss and company caught fire there a little bit in the fourth quarter, or I should say in the second half, and started throwing the ball up to their guys, and their guys made some plays. But yeah, they have to be able to get after the quarterback. They've got 6 sacks. Wisconsin got 6 sacks in these first 3 games, but it doesn't feel like that, right? It doesn't feel like they've had consistent pressure. The outside linebacker room that they remade has to play a huge game on Saturday. They have to enforce, or I should say, impose their will on that offensive line and get after it. And where's your confidence that that can happen?
It's not high, but it doesn't mean that they can't do it. I know we sound like a broken record, and I think people who listen or watch maybe wonder what we're seeing in practice. They really did do it in practice. Now you can say, well, what does that mean about the offense? But I feel like they've got some of that explosive playmaking ability. It just has not come through. I believe they have 2 sacks collectively, certainly out of that top 3. Daryl Peterson and Leon Lowry each have 1. John Pius, we really have not heard from him very much. Doesn't have any sacks, has played a decent amount of snaps. And so absolutely, they've got to figure out a way to get some pressure on him and make life difficult, because otherwise he's just going to stand back there and tear them up. You're right about the big wide receivers on the outside. Lane was the one who had that 24-yard touchdown catch, kind of just leapt right in front of 2 guys, and that's what he's going to be able to do.
I wonder if maybe a guy like Sebastian Cheeks, who he's a different type of rusher, I believe was the words that Luke Fickell used when he was asked about him. Can you get him on the field? Because, and where is some of the it's unfortunate for Wisconsin. I'll say that because they had some guys that got hurt in fall camp that potentially could have helped them early on, right? And not healthy enough yet. But Sebastian Cheeks, could he get on the field? Could he help him? And maybe, instead of putting Christian Allegro just out there on 3rd down, maybe use him on some other downs, because he's shown the explosion to get after the quarterback as well. I'm intrigued by maybe some of the things that they were able to work on during the bye week, but I also know that thinking that is also, I'm going to watch on Saturday, and it's going to be the exact same thing, excuse me. Right? I mean, how much is going to change during the bye week? Probably not a ton.
Yeah. It's what changes is the amount of time you have to prepare. And if you are Wisconsin or a Badgers fan, you have to hope that will make a difference, that they got a week off. They had an extra opportunity to prepare. Meanwhile, USC is battling it out in a slugfest in Michigan Stadium in a game that they lost with less time to prepare for Wisconsin. Will that make a difference? I don't think so, but not substantial enough to change the outcome, but Wisconsin's going to have to hope it does.
Well, I think the hope is that it used to be like games, teams that had to play Wisconsin, and then the next week they were so beat up, or, it was such a physical game that, kind of got it handed to them by their next opponent because they just weren't able to rebound. Maybe Michigan does that. Maybe Wisconsin is able to take advantage of, the game last week that USC had to play and the physicalness of it. Maybe they can take advantage of it. We'll see. Thomas Heiberger was the name I was trying to think of, who obviously the knee injury in fall camp, and who knows if he'll be healthy enough this year to get back on the field. Haven't heard anything about him, and I guess we'll see when and if that ends up being the case. All right, let's play a little overreaction or no here, Jesse. Losing James Thompson Jr. was a bigger loss than Tyler Van Dyke. Is that an overreaction or no?
It's an overreaction to me. I don't know how good the defensive line would have been anyway. Certainly he was the leader, and I would have expected him to have a strong year. He was the only guy coming back that had more than a sack. He had 3 a year ago. On the other hand, we're talking about the freaking quarterback who's got the ball in his hands every play, who came here as a transfer with a year left to be a difference maker and won the job. And to me, it became more and more obvious why the longer that went on. I just think there's you could say this about the defensive line, but I'd say at quarterback, there's a big enough difference between what Van Dyke does and what Locke does that it changes the complexion and trajectory of the season, to me, in a more substantial way than not having a starting defensive lineman.
I would agree with that. I could also, though, make the argument that it is James Thompson Jr., just simply because of the fall off between Jamestown, where he was at and what they've gotten so far from the defensive line at this point, the inability to get off blocks. What did Trussell call it? Disengagement? No, what was it? Block what? Whatever. It was whatever he called it. He called it block shedding. Haven't been good at it at all. have not been good at leveraging the ball, meaning they haven't been able to turn it inside and get it to the guys, that can make a tackle. And he's not just talking about the defensive line, he's talking about the entire defense, but they also have not, gotten hats to the ball, which leads to turnovers, which they have not created. They've created two and really it's just one because the other one was the punt, right?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, they've only got one. They only have one turnover, the Xavier Lucas interception, right?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. They got
So
total. It's pretty bad.
Yeah, it's not great. So they have to do a better job in all of those aspects. And Tressa was talking about how they are making that a focus for themselves, where it was we need to, during the bye week, get back to doing the little things as opposed to just trying to game plan. Get off of blocks, force the ball inside, force the ball to your help, and stay in your gap. Don't gap integrity, like all that stuff that the run game has just not been very good at these first 3 weeks. I think James Thompson Jr. potentially helps that. And Wisconsin's in a better spot. He's a guy that you can count. He's a guy that had played a ton of football. That said, they weren't great stop of the run last year, and he was on the field as well. So I think you could say that too.
There's no doubt that he would help them. They would be better. I look at this question from the perspective of who would be more responsible for helping this team go out and win a game. Yeah. And to me, it very clearly would be the quarterback.
For sure.
We'll never know what Tyler would have been able to do with a little bit more time. Obviously, it wasn't great early, but I think he still had a lot of potential. And obviously, we'll see what happens next year in the quarterback room in general.
Which goes to this question, I think maybe. If things don't turn around, both the Wisconsin coordinators won't be back next year. Is that an overreaction or no?
I think that's an overreaction. Let's just be real. It feels very much like the one who is most likely on the hot seat is Phil Longo, just because of what this offense has looked like. And maybe Mike Tressel has earned himself a longer leash because of the time spent together with Luke at Cincinnati when they had tremendous success. Both of those coordinators are in spots where they just don't seem to have the people that they need or able to implement the schemes that they need that they ran previously to put this team in a position to succeed. We talked about on Tuesday defensively because we had a chance to talk to Mike Tressel on Monday. He ran a lot of 3-3-5 at Cincinnati. They did a lot of different things. He also had a half dozen NFL draft picks, and they haven't done that. And you're seeing on offense what Wisconsin is, and it's just not what Phil Longo's offenses have been. Last year probably more closely resembled what he wants it to look like, but it wasn't successful. So I don't think both would be gone, but let's just say this offense kind of muddles along and somehow is worse this year than it was last year. That's a real challenge. And obviously you could say, I lost my starting quarterback both years. I lost my starter for a month in year one and my starter for the last 9.5 games. And that's valid. So I don't see both of them gone, but obviously Luke strikes me as the type of guy who, if things are not going well, he will make changes because he's just not going to stand for the way things have been.
Who recruited Braden Locke? Who wanted Braden Locke? Yeah.
Yes.
So who wanted Mabry Matoyer? Phil Longo.
Yes.
So those are his choices, and now he has to play with them. But I think at the end of the year, if they're going to continue to run the offense the way they have these first 3 games, if I'm Phil Longo, do I want to be here? Is that who I want to be? I don't know that that's who I want to be. And so maybe it'll just be a parting of ways as opposed to, leave me. Because I want to run the offense that have been great, or I want to run the offense that in my past has been the offense that has been successful for me. And they're not doing that right now. And you can say personnel, but that's also their personnel. They're the ones that recruited it. So, to me, and I think we've talked about this before, let the dude run the offense. That's what you brought him here for. Let him run the offense. But that it doesn't feel like that is currently the case. All right. If the Badgers lose, this is a little bit over the top. So I'm just going to throw this out here. It's slow over the top. If the Badgers lose, at least a couple guys are going to ask that they're redshirting and leaving the program. The only reason I bring that, is that an overreaction or no?
Yes, it is an overreaction, but I know why you brought it up. So go ahead.
Yeah, the only reason I brought it up is obviously because the huge story that broke on, I guess, late Tuesday night, but was a story all day Wednesday. The UNLV quarterback, and there are the Wisconsin connection here in this story with Marcus Cromartie being his agent, the former cornerback at Wisconsin, who obviously, well, maybe not obviously because it's been 12 years, but returned an interception for a touchdown in the Big Ten championship game, was a starter on that team, a starter the year before when they won the Big Ten. He's his agent, and he said that they had an agreement in place, a verbal agreement, which is, yeah, it's a verbal agreement to pay $100,000, and it wasn't obviously the collective or even the head coach; it was the defensive coordinator, and so they have a little bit of an issue there and just back and forth. But this is obviously the problem in place here is that there's no set guidelines and set rules, and that's a rather significant problem the NCAA is trying to deal with right now, whether through Congress or through their own membership. But either way, what it has allowed is it allowed the quarterback to say, I'm redshirting this year, and I'll have another year to go. He's kind of doing what Tyler Van Dyke has the opportunity to do here. Is he's only played in 3 games, and he could leave and still have one more year to go. But I think even more notable was at USC with one of their defensive linemen, what's his name?
Alexander.
I'm sorry?
Bear
Alexander announced last night that because of the playing time that he has gotten these first few games, he's redshirting and not going to play again, but he's not leaving. He's allegedly or apparently staying at USC. But could we see this more and more, you think?
So I'm glad you brought that up, because that, to me, among the two situations, is the one that I think is most likely to take place with the way things are constructed in college football. If you're unhappy with your playing time, you see countless dudes leave at the end of the season when the transfer portal opens. But you also have to plan ahead if you're not happy with your situation. And now more than ever, you're going to see it because there's no penalty to go. So it'd be one thing if you, like under the old rules, you had to sit out a year, or you had to sit out a year and you lose a year of eligibility. You had to think long and hard about what you wanted to decide. But now if you're not happy and you realize, if I don't play beyond these 4 games, I'm going to have another year. Yeah, I think this is something that's realistic for every team across the country.
Yeah, I mean, Keontae Lewis did it last year.
Mm-hmm.
He had his redshirt year available, and he took it, and ended up only playing 2 games at Wisconsin, but he could have played up to 4. The reason I bring this up, this is game 4, and there could be people, if this does not go the way that they want it to go, or whatever, could be like, nah, you know what, I'm gonna chill. And I think for Bear Alexander, it's a possibility of even more NIL money because he's getting paid this year. He's gonna have an opportunity to get paid more next year. He's a guy that just has not been able to stay in one place and commit to one thing. I believe he committed to Georgia, then decommitted, then committed again, then went to the portal, and is now not committing to actually being on the field. Either way, I think it's certainly a possibility around college football that these guys are going to see this thing. The UNLV running back, who was a 4th-string guy, this was not NIL related. He just didn't like his playing time, so he's gonna sit and go back to the portal after transferring from NC State. I believe he transferred from somewhere else to NC State originally. So there are guys that are going to take advantage of it, and I know there's a lot of people in college football that do not like it, and I totally get it. But it's kind of the world we live in right now when there's no penalty to move from place to place. All right, this one is something that happened on Twitter yesterday that I had to talk about. A Wisconsin win would be the greatest regular season victory in school history. Is that an overreaction or no?
Well, that is an absurd take, and I think most people would roast that take. I think everyone would roast that take. I can, off the top of my head, think of several games that are a bigger deal. I went and looked at in the fact book that we get each year. They've got the AP Top 25, Wisconsin's record against all those teams, and it's not particularly good over the course of history, but like the top games Wisconsin's played against top 5 teams, I think the Badgers have 16 wins in history. And I think it's like 70 losses, but that's irrelevant. The point is they have won enough games against top 5 teams that were a way bigger deal. And the 1981 win against Michigan, number 1 in the country, 2010 against Ohio State, number 1 in the country. I don't know how it gets much bigger than beating the number 1 team in the country, but if you're looking for others, there's a lot. Even when they beat LSU at Lambeau Field in 2016, that was a top 5 LSU team at the time, and it at least springboarded Wisconsin to go from unranked to ranked and end up being a double-digit win team that went to the Cotton Bowl. And I'm sure you have a much longer list, but let's just say this game to me wouldn't even be in the top, 15, 10, more?
It's not. Yeah, I mean, it's not because of a lot of the things that have happened already this year. But that was a take from radio host Steve the Homer True in Milwaukee, and I have a soft spot for Homer because he helped me a lot when I was early in my career, and so I'm not. This is not a shot at him. It's just sometimes he gets a little over the top with some hyperbole here, and I don't think he means greatest because people were throwing all these other games at him, and he was talking about it's on the road against the top 15 team. You are coming off a loss to a 42 to, getting blown out by Alabama. You're playing with your backup quarterback. No one expects you to win. You'd be the greatest. And I think that's describing the most unlikely wins, more so than the greatest wins. And so I think it would be one of the more unlikely of wins. But even the Michigan game in 1981 is more unlikely. They were I think I went back and looked at a column that was written the day before that game, and they were between 19 and 25 point underdogs, just depending on where you looked, at home as number 1 team. Now that Wisconsin team ended up being okay and had there been the number of bowl games now that there were back then. I actually, you know what they did? I think they did play in a bowl game that year, didn't they? They went to a couple games in there. I don't remember exactly. Either way, they ended up being a above 500 team. I think they went like 6-3 in the Big Ten. So it wasn't like they were a bad team by any stretch, but that caught people off guard significantly. So that was certainly more unlikely. I think more unlikely going into Penn State back in 1995 when they were 14-point underdogs against a Penn State squad that was ranked 6th in the country, had won 20 straight games. All those kind of things add up, and Wisconsin won that game. And it actually has some parallels to this year because to start that year, they got absolutely hammered by a national power in Colorado at home. Very similar to getting hammered by a national power in Alabama. So there are...
I needed you to give me time to look it up because I just couldn't let this hanging. Yes, they went to the Garden State Bowl in 1981, and they lost. And then it was the next year that they finally won a bowl game in the Independence Bowl. So Dave McClain had them rolling.
Yep. So, yes, I was close. I thought they did go to a bowl game. I just couldn't remember exactly. They were, and it wasn't. I was barely alive. So, the game on Saturday, while it is not going to be the greatest regular season victory in school history, or even in the top 15, I mean, we can just do the top 15 in the last 20 years, and it would be better than what that win would be. However, what a win would mean for Luke Fickell and what it would mean for the program right now would be significant and a very good sign of potential for the future of the program. But this year, like, they're not going to take that win and then all of a sudden go win then their next 8 games after this. Like, that's not going to happen. But it could be a game we look back at and be like, oh, they won that. And the, way the program was going was on the way up. And that was kind of where it turned around. Like that's the opportunity that they have on Saturday. It's not about greatest wins of all time, and certainly not in school history. So we'll see what it plays out. One more before we go to our picks. Booing athletes is acceptable now that they're earning money via NIL. Is that an overreaction or no?
This is a tough one for me. I don't think it's entirely an overreaction. It's just, and the premise of this question comes from a story that Joe Rex wrote for us at The Athletic. It's tough because the quarterback might be making $1 million, but the backup cornerback might be getting a scholarship and some food or something like that, even if everybody gets a little. So they're not all on the same playing field. I guess you could say that for the NFL too, because everyone's on a different contract, but at least they're professional players. So it's a really tricky situation. But if you are paying money, and not only are you paying for a ticket, but you're paying for a lot of other things, presumably, to have a chance to support your team, I think maybe you have a right to be displeased if things aren't going particularly well.
I always felt, as a fan, I'm not going to say that I never booed at a Wisconsin game, like growing up, but like the team as a whole, as opposed to maybe the individual. And as the older I got, and you're just like, well, these kids are getting scholarships, but they're not getting paid. And so it's like, it felt kind of wrong to boo them. But as soon as NIL came around, like, I don't have a problem with it anymore. I really don't. And I know that you're right. Different guys are getting paid different amounts, but booing is a, not a responsibility, but it's it's something that you get to do when you're a fan. It's just same thing as getting to cheer. You get an opportunity to do what you want. You paid for your ticket. These kids are now most of them are getting some form of payment to be at Wisconsin. Boo and do whatever you want. I don't have a problem with it. All right, let's get into our picks for the week. It's week 5. You had another solid week. You went 4-3 again. I went 3-4 again. Do you take an issue with that? You look like
No,
you're about to take issue with that.
not at all.
Okay. Because I added it up last night, and you started out hot. A little bit. Some of the picks later on were not as great, but you are out to a very nice start, 17-11. If people had just been taking your picks the last 2 years, whether it was Temple and Heilprin or this year, they'd be very, very far over 500.
I don't know how to explain it. I wish I had a magic 8-ball, but maybe I should take this to Vegas.
I know how to explain it. Don't think about it too much. Just do it.
There you go. That's a backhanded compliment if I ever heard one, but I'll take it.
Do you put a lot of time into your picks?
A lot, maybe doing a lot of work in that sentence, but generally I try to look at what the teams have done to date, and that can kind of color my picks.
Okay. All right. We got 7 more games this week. We will start with a top 25 matchup in Manhattan, Kansas. It is Oklahoma State going on the road as the 20th ranked team in the country, going to Kansas State. The Wildcats are 5-point favorites in that one.
Both these teams have a loss. Oklahoma State just lost to Utah. Kansas State got roasted by BYU, which gives me pause. And that's why I think I'm going to go Oklahoma State to cover. I mean, I got some points to work with, so Cowboys.
Yeah, I'm going to take Kansas State there at home, bounce back off of what was, you're right, a very disappointing loss to BYU. And it wasn't even disappointing. It was ugly. So, Louisville, 15th ranked team in the country, going to Notre Dame, who's ranked 16th, and Notre Dame 6.5-point favorite there.
Notre Dame losing to Northern Illinois throws off my entire understanding of this team and this program, but they obviously returned to form against Purdue. 6.5 is a lot, but I'm just going to go with my gut and say the Fighting Irish cover.
I'm going to roll with Notre Dame as well. I do 66-7? Was that the last time? And I know Purdue's not great, or good, but that was a nice bounce back. A huge one in the Big Ten. Brett Bielema, the 4-0 Illinois Fighting Illini, 19th ranked team in the country, going to Penn State to face the 9th ranked Nittany Lions. Got some trash talk, not trash talk, maybe some I don't want to call it bulletin board material, but Brett Bielema. I shouldn't say this. James Franklin, after the game on Saturday, said that we need some whiteout energy, because it was going to be a big game with Illinois coming in. And Brett Bielema was like, the Nebraska game, that's a much tougher place to play than Beaver Stadium. And whiteout energy, whatever that is. So he's put himself out there a little bit. We know Brett likes to do that type of stuff. What do you think is a tough place to play? Nebraska or Penn State?
Oh man.
I think Penn State.
I would say Penn State too. I mean, the whiteout is really special. They get 100,000+ fans, but I'm also, my perspective is clouded by the fact that Wisconsin has won a lot of games against Nebraska. Obviously, lost in 2012, but I would say Penn State.
So it looks like I accidentally forgot to put the spread of that game.
I was going to ask what the number was so I could make a pick.
Yeah, just a second. Chill out. I know Penn State's obviously favored in the game. Penn State, holy crap. Penn State's favored by 18.
Wow. I really didn't think it was going to be that high.
That's crazy.
Illinois. That's just too many points for Illinois is going to do, I mean, Wisconsin-esque things. They try to like keep control of the ball, and I just think Illinois is going to cover.
I mean, Luke Altmaier's been pretty darn good this year,
and
obviously so is Drew Aller, or Allar, excuse me. 18's a lot, but it's also at Penn State. Brett Bielema's giving them some juice. Now I'll take Illinois to cover.
You wanted to do it, though.
I did. But Illinois has won at Penn State before. They did it, I want to say, whether it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Brett Bielema, remember, what was that? It was that safety off game, right? It was a tie, and they just kept on going back and forth, those 2-point conversions. I don't remember what year that was. I don't think that Penn State team was any good. It might have been 2020. So maybe pre-Brett Bielema. But Arkansas at number 24, Texas A&M. The Aggies are 4-point favorites.
This is I put as little thought into this one as any of the games. I'm just going to say Texas A&M covers at home.
This was a throw-in. I didn't see any other game on the schedule that I actually wanted to talk about or even look at. But I thought it was funny, and I brought up this one because Hugh Freeze last week, they played Arkansas and got beat pretty good. And then after the game, Hugh Freeze, who's at Auburn, was like, "We beat them 9 times out of 10." So every other time we played them, if we played them 10 times, we beat them 9 times, and they got beat pretty handily. So I thought it was kind of funny. I wanted to include that, but I'm going to go Texas A&M as well. Minnesota coming off a pathetic performance against Iowa. That would just become the norm for PJ Fleck, pathetic performances against major conference teams. At Michigan, who is ranked 12th in the country and favored by 9.5 in the battle for the Little Brown Jug. I don't believe PJ has any of their trophies right now. So go ahead. Sorry.
It's a big-ish number, but I mean, how can you not be impressed with the way Michigan ran the ball last week? 290 yards. They've got a mobile quarterback. They've got a physical defense. I think they cover at home and start to put the pieces back together after a tough start.
It's funny about the 290 yards. How much did Iowa run for against Minnesota? It was right around that number too. I'm going to take Michigan at home. Number 2, Georgia on the road at Alabama, but the Dogs are 2-point favorites.
I've got recency bias on my mind, and also having actually seen one of these teams in person. It's a totally different ball game against a team like Georgia, but Alabama's got Jalen Milroe, who's played every bit like a Heisman candidate. They've got a sensation at wide receiver. They have 2 running backs that have averaged 7-8 yards a carry. I think at home they get it done.
Last 5 quarters, they've been dominant. You think back to the final quarter against South Florida. Obviously, they were dominant against Wisconsin. At home, as an underdog, I'm going to go with Alabama as well. Wisconsin, traveling to USC. Trojans 15.5-point favorites in a game that will kick off at 12:30 local time.
I know Wisconsin just lost by 32 points. This just strikes me as a huge number, and I do think Wisconsin off a bye week will have a plan in place to keep this game close enough that they cover. That means absolutely nothing for anyone in this program because I still think USC is going to win by 10 points or so, multiple scores, but 15.5 is huge, so the Badgers will at least cover.
It's a big number, and we all have a plan in place and how we want things to go. and then you get on the field and you get punched in the face, kind of like the Mike Tyson thing. Everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the face. And in Wisconsin's case, it was getting punched in the face and putting the ball on the ground, right? Like losing your starting quarterback and then putting the ball on the ground. That's why that Alabama game got out of hand. It was mistakes by Wisconsin. That said, I think Wisconsin keeps it close enough. I don't think they win, but you're right. 15.5 is a big number, but I also wouldn't be surprised, USC coming off that very, very tough loss to Michigan, bouncing back and having a really good performance against Wisconsin. But we're not going to be negative. We're not going to be negative. I'm not going to be negative. I'm going to sit here and say that Wisconsin's able to cover that 15.5. And we'll see if they can get it done. Jesse, enjoy your trip out to LA. For everybody that won't be making that trip, hand up. Going to be doing a post-game show here on the YouTube page. For those listening, check it out. Going to be doing a post-game show right after the game on Saturday night. So like 5:36, depending on when the game is over. And we'll talk all about it. And then me and Jesse will get together on Sunday at some point, or maybe Monday, and talk over as Wisconsin gets ready for a visit from Purdue. Jesse, thank you very much.
Thanks, Zach.
All right, there he is, Jesse Temple from The Athletic. You've been listening to The Camp.